Right. So the sound quality may not be great because I'm, as I said in the group, I'm out of town, so I don't have my mic with me, the proper mic. So I'm just using the laptop mic, which is not great. So the sound is a bit unreliable, I think, maybe. So anyway, yeah, the chat is disabled. You can just type what you want in the Q&A. Okay, so we'll start inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أستغفرك اللهم من كل ذنب وأتوب إليك وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وسلم تسليما كثيرا. The reason of this lesson is basically to address some of the questions that have been asked in the Telegram group. Usually I answer the questions writing, so basically I write and answer those many of the questions, but there are quite a few questions that came in which I thought will probably need a little bit of background explanation and some sort of discussion, and perhaps we can have a lesson to discuss those questions. So there was a question about Ashari versus Muatazili and how we can be sure that Ashari is right and they're not like Muatazili and so on. It's posted in the group anyway. There is another question about the Imam Ghazali methodology of type of Sufism, and there was also another question about Imam Ghazali also as well position on Ilm al-Kalam. So we will talk about Imam Ghazali first because perhaps this is the shorter answer. The other question about Ashari versus Mu'tazili and so on, we need to discuss a lot of background about those matters first. So we will leave that for last. So starting with Imam Ghazali Tasawuf, his like the method of Tasawuf. Now, Tasawuf is the same all over the years. It's basically to submit to Allah, to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as if you see. This is what came in the hadith, the Jibreel hadith, the very famous and widespread. We talked about that many, many times. When Jibreel alayhi salam went to the Prophet in the form of a man and asked the Prophet, peace be upon him, some questions about Islam and about Iman and about Ihsan. And we said Ihsan is basically the pillar for Tasawwuf. So what is the difference then? Or what are the issue here? The issue here is by the time of Imam Ghazali, we have to be mindful about the circumstances that he existed in, the culture, what was common among the people. So many things that Imam Ghazali is talking about are to large extent inapplicable nowadays. For example, when he's talking about living in a house or in a home with no paint, just with nothing. Right. So that was maybe more common and more widespread at his time. That was just normal. Nowadays, that's not the issue, or not something that you can do. Quite the opposite. If you do something like that, you will attract attention to yourself, and that defeats the purpose of tasawwuf. The tasawwuf, you should not have a dunya and desires in your heart. So by standing out and attracting attention to you, attracting praise to you, you expose yourself to shaitan, to riwayah, to arrogance, and all that sort of things that you don't want. Because if you, for example, try to be a zahid and say, okay, I'm going to be living in a house with no paint, with nothing, just blocks. I am not going to be driving cars, and you think like in that sense that this is basically like worshipping. Well, it is not. What was applicable over 1,000 years ago, or close to 1,000 years ago, is not applicable now. So I have to be mindful of that. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, naha, or said you shouldn't do libas al-shuhra. You shouldn't dress something that is uncommon, that attracts attention to you. For example, even if you are covering yourself, if a woman covering herself and covering her head and hair and everything and head and everything, but she is wearing the type of dress which is not common in the area where she lives and attracts attention, then that is not allowed. It's not a good thing. So in the same token, attracting attention to yourself to receive praise is not good. And I mean that goes on. For example, I give you also another example. It's a story our Shuyukh teaches us, and it is probably true. But even if it is not true, the notion of the story and the wisdom of the story is very important and very, very true. There was a young man who passed by a lake and found an older man, very poor, very humble, worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and living in basically just below minimum. And then he observed that the young man observed the older man. He goes every day to the lake, basically fishing, and wait until he gets one fish and eats it, and that's it for his entire day. And he keeps going every day, just wait for hours and hours and hours till he gets his fish and go away and so on. So, and he was worshipping Allah and reading, reciting Quran and so on. So the man, or the young man basically said, "Oh, that is a great man. That's a great wali. I have to go there and ask him for his blessing and dua and so on." So he went to him and basically introduced himself and so on and asked him for dua and so on and so forth. And this sheikh told him to go to a friend of his in another town close by and basically deliver a message and say that he just passes his regards and greetings to him, and ask him for dua for this man, like the sheikh himself. So the youth went to the other town, and as he approached, he looked for that man he has been sent to, and he found him um, like very wealthy, has guards with him, riding the best kind of horse at that time, with all the fancy stuff on it, and just wearing very expensive and fancy dresses and so on. So he went to him and he said, "Assalamu alaikum, hi, I'm Fulan," and basically your friend in the other town, named so and so, passes on his greeting and asks you to pray for him and make dua for him. So that rich man turned to the youth and told him, "Tell him, wa alaykum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. أما آن لك أن تخرج الدنيا من قلبك? Is it about time that you took dunya out of your heart?" So the youth was shocked and said, "Oh, what is happening?" And talking to himself, saying, "Oh, how is you saying something like that to the other man? The other man, the other sheikh is zahid. He has nothing. He just lives on fish, just one fish a day, and even sometimes he can't even eat. And you're all this richness and talking about who's having dunya in his heart." So he was astonished. However, there is nothing he could do except going back to the previous sheikh, the other sheikh that he sent him initially. So we went to him and told him what happened. So the sheikh said, "Yes, he is correct. I have the dunya in my heart. Every time I go to the lake, I wonder, am I going to get a fish or not? How long I'm going to have it? Will Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provide for me? So I still have a dunya in me. So the youth was very surprised. What about the other one? He told him, the other man that I sent you to, the dunya has nothing to do, nothing whatsoever in his heart. And this is what we are about. This is basically a tasawwuf. And that's what Imam al-Ghazali was saying. He's teaching you how to detach the dunya from you. Okay? But if it is in your hand, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave it in your hand, then use it for what pleases Allah. Okay? So that is the true zuhd. The true zuhd is zuhd from something that you have. If you are already poor, don't call yourself a zahid. You don't have. The zahid means you have something, but then you turn away from it. Like your heart turns away from it. It's not attached to it. It doesn't affect you. The gold and dust are the same to you in your eyes. Right? So anyway, so basically Imam Ghazali wants to teach you that. And he in applying his way, he teaches you how to apply it in your practice, in your life, in your reality. In his reality, the application was by doing certain action, certain things. Nowadays, the application will change. So you take from Imam Ghazali the concept, which is the same concept as al-hadith that we talked about. You take from Imam Ghazali the methodology of application, but not the application itself. You reflect that application to your reality and your life and see how that can be applied. Right? So this is very important. Now, building on this, perhaps I think that answers the first question. Before we move on, Imam al-Shadili, for example, the Imam of Tariq al-Shadili, the Maruf Imam al-Hasan al-Shadili, very famous, very known. When he started the Tariq and took his Tariq from his Shaykh, the Mashij and so on, he got used to wear a very expensive, a very nice clothes. And at his time, there was still some of those, they called themselves poor, al-fuqara, which are basically Sufi. But they were very poor clothes and torn apart and so on and so forth. And then when he started doing that, they would approach him and criticize him, saying, how do you do that? Are you calling yourself Sufi by wearing those kind of fancy clothes? So he would reply, my clothes tells everybody I don't need them. But your clothes tells everybody that you need them. And again, this is the point. Like early on in Islam, people were like by default poor. It was hard to find clothes anyway. So if you are not wearing proper clothes or whatever, that doesn't attract attention to you. That's nothing. That's normal. That doesn't say that you are a good man. That doesn't say that you are a Sufi, that you are a Zahid, that whatever. That doesn't attract praise. But if you continue, people are now developing and wearing other stuff and riding other stuff, and it's basically that fancy of life, fanciness of life is increasing. And by holding yourself back to the early ages, you are basically trying to stand out. That's not good. Okay. So building on that now, I think that addresses the first question. Building on that to answer the second question about Imam Ghazali point of view about ilm al-kalam, right? So now that we know that Tasawuf, the perspective of Tasawuf in Imam Ghazali, what he is talking about, I think it was about something he said in Kitab al-Muqaz bil al-Dalal. Now, what he is talking about is he wants something more. He is talking about a higher level of certainty in belief, not the logical certainty that Ilm al-Kalam gives you. He wants a heart submission. That's what he's looking at. And the important thing to note here is Ilm al-Kalam will give you definite and certainty, logical certainty in its scope, which is basically to prove that Allah exists, to prove Allah's attributes and characteristics, and so on, attributes and so on. But it does not give you belief in Allah. It does not. Otherwise, everybody would have been Muslim and mu'min, right? If that was the case, then anyone like Descartes would have read the work of al-Ghazali, for example, and said, "Oh, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah." He would read the work of like Imam Fakhr Razi, and he said, "Oh, Islam is the true way." But they don't. Although the work of Imam Ghazali, the work of Imam Razi, the work of all the Kalam scholars provides definitive answers and definitive proof of the existence of Allah, of His attributes, of the Islam, that as a true message, and in the Prophet, peace be upon him, as the true messenger. So, but what happens? What happens here is yourself. Is yourself ready to submit? Is yourself able to submit? Submission is something different than basically being defeated in argument. So Ilm al-Kalam will defeat any argument against it. But does that mean after defeating it that you are going to be submitting to it? No. And exactly in the same token, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying about those kafir who will, even if they see angels descending from the sky, they will say what? They will say, "Oh, that's just magic." No matter what they see, no matter how much argument will be presented to them, no matter how much debate will go and how much argument they will lose, they will never believe. That's why they go to hellfire. Otherwise, you wouldn't. Otherwise, you would have been no need for hellfire. Okay. So, in that sense, there is a difference in levels. If you talk about certainty and definitive answer and definitive and so on, there is a definitive proof that is provided in Ilm al-Kalam for its scope, but there is something beyond that Imam al-Ghazali wanted. He talked about it also in the Munqidh al-Dalal as well, in the same book, when he talked about an-nubuwwah, what is prophecy exactly, and that it's a type of realization beyond logic, beyond your mind, beyond mind. That is basically another. It is like there are levels of realization, like your senses have a level, and then above that another level, and then the logical and the mind level of realization and knowledge and understanding encompass all that. But over that, there is another level which we don't have. That is a prophecy level. And what they know in the unseen, they realize the unseen in a way that we cannot realize. But we get something with that sometimes. What we call, for example, when we have a good dream or a dream about something that's going to happen, that is a kind of realization that has nothing to do with our senses, has nothing to do with our logic, has nothing to do with like al-khabar, with a historical account or a record of something that's been passed on to us, which are the three knowledge or type of we're going to talk about that as well just in the last question or the third question. The three type of the epistemology, basically. These are the Islamic pillars of acquiring knowledge, the three main pillars, right? But there is another one over those, which is the prophecy. We take some of that sometimes. So everybody gets dreams that actually happens. But this is just a part of it. There are a lot of other stuff. Some of those other realization beyond logic and beyond everything is acquired or occurs to awliya, what we call kashf, discovering or uncovering. Sometimes we get that. Imam al-Shatibi, the famous qira'at scholar, who's basically we read 90% of the Islamic world read through his way, the Al-Shatibiyya, author of Al-Shatibiyya, in the 7 qira'at. basically, he was in his halaqah, in his lesson, and Imam al-Sakhawi, his student, usually will go and read first. He was his closest or most competent student. He is always basically, or usually reads first and so on. So in one day, the Imam al-Sakhawi went to the halaqah, the first one, before anybody else, and sat down. And then the others started to come. Imam al-Shatibi said, who came second, read first. Right? So basically skipping Imam al-Ghazali, Imam al-Sakhawi, skipping that who came first. And that was out of the ordinary. That was weird. So Imam al-Sakhawi kept asking himself, what's happening? Why I am being skipped? Did I do anything wrong? Is there something wrong? And then he realized that he is actually on janaba. He needs to take shower. He had a wet dream. Sorry, he had a wet dream. Right? So he went fast to take shower, to shower, do ghusl, and came back. Right? And sat in the halaqah. Again, without even the Shatibi see him, Imam al-Shatibi see him or realize him, or basically like from a different sense way. And then he said, الآن من جاء أولا فليقرأ. Now that who came first, read. Now put in your mind that Imam al-Shatibi was actually blind. So he was blind. So even if he wasn't blind, how would he have known that Imam al-Sakhawi was janaba, had janaba, and cannot read Quran? How he would know that? Right? That's kashf. That is what Imam al-Ghazali was talking about. Sorry, I said Imam al-Ghazali again. How Imam al-Shatibi would have known that Imam al-Sakhawi was on janaba. Okay? And this kind of knowledge and yaqeen, this is what Imam al-Ghazali was talking about in al-Munqiz bin Abdullah. This is something that you cannot get from the argument of kalam and debate and so on and so forth. Okay? All right. But clearly, Imam al-Ghazali said, علم الكلام كاف لمقصوده in كتاب المنقذ في الضلال. المنقذ الضلال. المنقذ من الضلال. So he said, علم الكلام is sufficient for its purpose, and which means its purpose is defending the aqidah and defending the proper Islamic aqidah and theology and so on. And in order for it to be sufficient for its purpose and fit for the purpose, it has to provide definitive proof. So the Imam al-Azhari doesn't debate or does not say that the kalam doesn't provide definitive knowledge. It does provide definitive knowledge for its level, but for a higher level, a higher purpose, that is the Imam Ghazali was after, he couldn't get that from ilm al-kalam. Where he was able to get it? From Tasawuf. Okay? I hope this is clear. All right. The last question is going to take a little bit of time. We'll try to address it as soon as much as I can. Now, it was about. So now we answered the question. Imam Ghazali, like way of tasawwuf, and to what extent it's applicable to nowadays, our day. And we said, you take the principles, you take the basics, you take the ideas, you take the methodology of adopting, but not the adaptation itself. You need to reflect that on your own reality. That's why you need a sheikh, right, to guide you. But anyway, so that's basically we answered. We also answered the question about Ilm al-Kalam and Imam Ghazali, in what he said, like specifically about some of his statements, Imam Ghazali's statements in Kitab, the book called Munqiz min al-Dalal. And then we move on to the Ashari and Mu'tazila. Now, I just want to read the question again. I don't remember it, like the details of it. But let's give just maybe you read it. Right. So the question is, Ash'ari creed is based on observation of reality and using reasoning and aql versus naql thing. And same did by Mu'tazili. We condemn them, I think it mean Mu'tazili, but we believe we have true creed as Ash'ari. I think that's what he means, which is acceptable in the sight of God, subhanahu wa ta'ala. My question is, how do we know Ash'ari is acceptable, but Mu'tazili is not, since we cannot judge without God telling us? Also, if a person wants to become Mu'tazili because, according to him, it makes more sense, why using reason becomes bad in that case? And he's talking about how we met somebody on Discord who's saying they are Mu'tazili and so on. And he was denying attributive speech using his logic. And and he was talking about the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And also, they came before Ash'ari, so it seems more of some difference between. Well, the question is like has a lot of things of sides. And I like the question because it opens up a lot of important discussions. But it is clear to me that like the question actually been risen due to misunderstanding of both Ash'ari and Mu'tazila. So, for example, the first thing we need to know is Ash'ari have three, or the Ash'ari and Ahl Sunnah in general, and like even most Muslim, well, not all of sects, for example, Mushabbiha and Mujassima don't do that. But as I said earlier, we have three main ways by which we acquire knowledge. The first is through our senses, right? You see something, you hear something, you taste something, you touch something, and so on. The second is through a record, an account. You being told something, whether reading it, somebody told you something, what we call khabar. The third, khabar sadiq for sure, right? So we have to make sure it's a truthful account, which is for Aqidah, we do that through tawatur, or if it is khabar mashhur, widespread, and supported by other evidence. The third is logical, by your mind. The logical, basically, way, the logical rules of the judgment, ahkam al-aql, judgment rules, and so on. Rules of judgment of mind, and so on. Okay, so these are the three main things that we acquire knowledge. So the notion that Ash'ari overrides aql, or takes aql and overrides naql, this cannot be further from the truth. This is basically misperception. This is something that al-Hashwiyya, the Mujassima, the corporealist, has been saying just saying and lying about Ash'ari about it, but it's not actually true. What Ash'ari and also Maturidi and Sunnah in general will do is they will apply the proper knowledge acquiring type for the applicable knowledge that it need to be acquired. So if it is something that requires senses, then they apply the sense. If it's something that is basically by khabar, by account, they will acquire it and accept it. If it is something by logic, then they will apply the logic. So It is a methodology that puts in like or applies those three things, integrate them in a consistent and cohesive way, makes all of them work together in a way that does not produce contradictory knowledge. Okay, so these are very important. The important thing is you cannot have a contradiction in revelation, because that means if there's a contradiction, even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that in the Quran, if you find a contradiction, then it is not from God. لو كان من عند غير الله لوجدوا فيه اختلافا كثيرا. So if the account, if the hadith is true, it has to be consistent with mind and logic. It should not be denial. And this is also the same way Muatazila will work. However, the problem with Muatazila is in their 5 principles. Al-Mu'tazila established 5 principles and rolled everything around them. And if mind, logic, or if khabar, account, or anything else contradicts with those established 5 principles of i'tizal, then they will throw it away. And that was the problem. And you can see that clearly when you look at Zamakhshari, for example, Imam Zamakhshari, when he's doing tafsir of Quran, when it goes to ayat, a lot of ayats that contradict their or those 5 principles, he will do sometimes linguistic gymnastic and logical gymnastic, trying to interpret the ayah in a way that is consistent with their established principles. And you can see it is actually like it's like twisting the ayah to match what they want to say. And this is the problem. The problem is inconsistent application of the logic or the khabar and so on. And that's why Ahl Sunnah basically came about. Ahl Sunnah, Imam al-Ashari, he was basically Mu'tazili for some time, until he found that, right, I mean, I'm throwing away a lot of hadith for no reason. They are not deniable logical. They are consistent with logic and aql, and the hadith is correct and consistent with the Quran, which is mutawatir. Everything is fine. Why do I have to do all those gymnastics in order to be consistent with some principle that doesn't even have a proof in itself, or debatable argument? So, and this is where Imam Ashari broke out from i'tizal. And I always say that, and it's very important. At the same time, we had Imam Abi Hassan al-Ash'ari in Al-Kufa and Baghdad and this side of the world. We had Imam al-Maturidi in the other side of the river. And we have Imam al-Tahawi in Egypt. And the three was more about the same time. And they didn't meet. They were every one of those scholars were basically residing in a very far away part of the world, and every one of those scholars wrote and documented the aqidah of Ahl Sunnah, the aqidah of the Sahaba, of the Salaf, documented. And we see that 3 documents that their work is almost identical. So if that is not enough proof that this is actually a mutawatir aqidah, and the only documented the mutawatir. So Imam al-Tahawi documented what was mutawatir in his part of the world. Imam Abi Hassan al-Ash'ari as well. Imam al-Maturidi also. They documented what was common and known and tawatur through generations to the Sahaba and to the Prophet, peace be upon him. And the 3 scholars, different places, produced almost identical word in the concepts and principles and so on. And so basically, I think the first part of the question is the al-Asha'ira and the Maturidiyya, they do not. There's very common misconception that Ash'ari and Maturidi do not use naql, and they threw the naql against the aql, the logic, the applied logic, and threw anything else. That is nonsense. That is incorrect. Okay. So that's the first part. The second part is al-Mu'tazila, and why al-Mu'tazila went deviated basically, and that was because of the way they established their madhab. And the part that Ashari came after Mu'tazili, al-Ashari came after Mu'tazili, that's also like not really relevant, because when we say Ash'ari, Imam al-Ash'ari came that time, that point of time where we are Ash'ari, Maturidiyya, or whatever, all what those scholars done is, as I said, documenting and defending the aqidah that was common and spread through generations leading to us Sahaba. So they started from Sahaba. They started with the Prophet, peace be upon him, and Sahaba, and what they learned from him. It is like when we say Al-Quran, we read Qira'at Hafs. When we read Qira'at Hafs, does that mean Hafs invented the Quran? Or Asim invented the Quran? Why don't we read the Prophet recitation? That is a very silly and stupid question. We actually read the recitation of the Prophet, peace be upon him, one of it, which has been preserved to us and passed on to us through certain scholars. So in the same way, when we say Ash'ari, Maturidi, Tahawi, they passed on to us the aqidah through what they learned through from generation leading all the way to the Prophet, peace be upon him. Okay. So I think that's most of the parts of the question. But yeah, the other side about Mu'tazila as well. Let's talk about Mu'tazila. I said there are 5 principles that led the Mu'tazila to go astray and deviate. And actually, they are in essence, they are only 2 principles. And these 2 principles were perhaps the primary. And out of them, you complete another 3 and you get to the 5. So what are these 2 main principles? The first one is a tawheed. One is of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in their position, and again, this is one misconception, that al-Mu'tazila negates or denies God's attributes. That is incorrect. They deny the ma'nawiyya attributes. They deny attributes that are separate from a zat, or not the essence of it. That's what they deny. But they say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alim, but alim, he is all-knowing, but not through a knowledge attribute, or not by a knowledge attribute. He is knowledgeable, all-knowing by his essence, through his essence. Done. It's just like that. Okay. So basically that's what this is the first principle. And why it is called Tawheed? Because in their perspective, if you affirmed, established attributes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that means those attributes are beginningless. And if that is the case, then you end up with not just one beginningless entity, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but a lot others. And basically that is shirk in their view. They say Christians and like the Trinity, where the Trinity came from. The Trinity came from the Christians affirming 3 attributes to Allah. Okay, and basically converting those attributes to entities and causing that to have, and that leading to shirk. So if Christians have committed shirk by 3 attributes, then you are more in a more like shirk state by affirming 7 or 8 attributes. Okay, so that's their rationale, their position. Of course, Ahl Sunnah rebut that and say that is not the case, because these are attributes abstract attributes. They are not entities in themselves. The essence is one. And in order for, like, when we talk about somebody is knowing, then he has to have knowledge, right? Anyway, I think we touched about that in the Qarida. We may expand upon it a little bit when we go to or as we go through al-Muqaddimat. And if you have more questions, we will answer it, inshallah. But I don't want to delve much into it. So anyway, this is Tawheed, the first principle. The second principle is al-Adl, justice. They say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is just. Why? Because, or what is the relevance of this? Everybody says Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is just. They say no, but you, Ahl Sunnah, claiming that the actions of the human being or the mukallaf is made or created by Allah, and that meaning or that leads to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala punishing humans for something that He created, and that is injustice, right? And again, I think we talked about that in detail in the Muqaddimat, so you can refer to that. Inshallah, it was actually the last lesson was about the free will, and we touched about that. We talked about. So basically, this is al-Adl, okay, and that's why they called themselves. They didn't actually call themselves Mu'tazila. They called themselves Ahl al-Adli wa Tawheed, people of Tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, these are the main two principles. But because of, again, as they were going through the hadith and Quran and everything else, they will twist those, although they are not the hadith or the Quran ayah or whatever is not against logic, but nevertheless, al-Mu'tazila will twist it in order to match and be consistent with what they already established, which is that's the problem. Okay. The third was al-Wa'd wal-Wa'id, which is the third principle of al-Mu'tazila, is al-Wa'd wal-Wa'id, which means whoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised or declared, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala declared that whoever does something good, He will reward him. Whoever does something bad, He will punish him. And this is a must. This wajib, it has to happen. It's necessary. Of course, Ahl Sunnah say no, it is not necessary. It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If He punishes somebody, He punishes him by the justice or fairness. But He can, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can decide not to punish someone who committed sin, and could also decide not to reward somebody who with obedience. And we all, everybody or anyone who will be of Ahl al-Jannah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ja'alna minhum, he will enter the Jannah under the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not by necessity. Okay, this is the point, not by necessity. But they say, Mu'tazila say, no, it's necessary. Al-Adl, al-Wa'd wal-Wa'id is necessary. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not do qabih, does not do injustice, and He will have to, and it must not have to, but it must happen. It's necessary. Otherwise, that affects the justice and the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the perfection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in their mind. Okay? So again, you will find that although they established those principles and they were the reason for their demise, and or maybe primarily like straying, but they established them in attempt or trying to glorify Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from any imperfections. And that's why we keep like all the scholars, I almost all of them that, or actually all who talked about these issues that I received knowledge from or studied on their hands, will usually say Mu'tazila is way better than al-Hashwiyya. Mu'tazila is way better than المشبهة والمجسمة. Because Mu'tazila, although they deviated, they actually defended Islam against the non-Muslims. They actually, especially in the early centuries, when there was nobody else defending Islam, they were great scholars that enriched the Islamic literature. As Zamakhshari, for just one example. They also, when they deviated, the cause of their deviation was they were trying to glorify Allah subhanahu in the most pure thing. Okay, so especially within these principles, they also say out of this third principle, it's basically Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have to do, or it's necessary that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does, no, actually it does from the I forgot whether this actually emits from the second or third principle, but basically doing as-salah wal-aslah, doing what is best for humans and so on. This is like a sub topic or sub principle. But you can see again that this is basically just trying to glorify Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Contrast that with al-Hashwiyya and al-Mujassima, they do the opposite of that. They give argument or debates that demolish the principles of Islam. Their argument, and basically what they give to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for attributes is basically imperfections to Allah. Right? So they are way worse than Mu'tazila. All right, so we talked about the first three principles of Mu'tazila. So the fourth is al-manzila bayn al-manzilatayn, the two or the state between the two levels. Al-manzila bayn al-manzilatayn, which is basically talking about murtakib al-kabira, anybody who commits a kabira. They don't call him kafir because Khawarij will call him kafir. Khawarij will say anybody who you did committed a kabira, you are kafir. Ahl al-Sunnah will say no, he's not kafir. It's his state and his case to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah will judge him on Judgment Day, and that's why they've been called murji'ah. Like they will delay the judgment, or delay the declaration of his state based on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala later in the Judgment Day, al-murji'ah. And that's why you may find some books will call Abu Hanifa murji'. That's Ahl Sunnah position. Right? These are different from the other type. Extreme murji'ah is different story. All right, so basically that's the fourth principle. The fifth principle, and in my opinion, that was the reason for Mu'tazila demise, or like basically what demolished their madhab completely is this principle. And that principle is al-amr bil-ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar. They had something in common with Khawarij, which is basically you have to apply ma'ruf and you have to deny munkar by hand, by force, and so on. And that's why al-Ma'mun were getting imprisoning the scholars and hitting them and punishing them to say what he wants to say and so on. And Khalifa al-Ma'mun, who was basically acting upon the advice of al-Mu'tazila. And this is why they basically got lost in the history after that. But also there is another reason why we don't hear about Mu'tazila now, and the reason is that as the time goes on and those issues between Mu'tazila and Ahl Sunnah got debated and argued back and forth, a lot of things being clarified, and there was no reason to have a debate like they knew their position was wrong and started to basically just go back under the Ahl Sunnah, like the later generations started to roll back under the Ahl Sunnah, and Ahl Sunnah became just the main and the only really like the mainstream of the it was always the mainstream, but there isn't other sect that had proper logic and actually good scholars, except the Mu'tazila, or mostly, right? Al-Hashwiyya or their scholars are just, the lowest grade. They wouldn't even bother, the scholars wouldn't even bother rebutting them. They would just say, uh, well, قالت الحشوية so and so, and it is clearly wrong. We don't need we don't even need to rebut that. That's nonsense. Okay, and so on. So basically, that's just like a brief background about Mu'tazila and their position, their creed, and I think that to a great extent addresses the third question. Trying to read the question again, just make sure that I answered everything. Yeah, like he's talking about the attribute of speech, and that's a great example about those issues that has been debated, and as Ahl Sunnah position clarified the confusion. Even Mu'tazila themselves came after that to say, "Oh, okay. I mean, there is no debate. There's no actually conflict there. We just more or less say the same thing, but in different way." So basically, that's another factor about Mu'tazila. So anybody who's following Mu'tazila now, I don't think they are following the proper creed for sure. And I hope what I have explained so far gives good explanation about it, or provide answers to the question that has been asked. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.